Hi, welcome to the Personal History Hub. This video is the 8th civil rights content video, and we're going to be having a look at the murder of Emmett Till today. So, on Wednesday, the 31st of August, 1955, a young American teenager's body was pulled out of the Tallahatchie River in Mississippi. It was found to be badly mutilated. But what actually did happen to Emmett Till? That's what we're going to explore now. So in 1941, Emmett Till was born in Chicago. He was the son of Mamie Carthen. Mamie Carthen was born in Mississippi, but her family had migrated to Chicago when she was 2 years old in order to escape all the racism, poverty, and brutality that was happening in the South. In the summer of 1955, Mamie Till Bradley's uncle, 64-year-old Mose Wright, visited her and Emmett in Chicago during the summer and told Emmett stories about living in the Mississippi Delta. Emmett wanted to see for himself. Mose lived in a town called Money in Mississippi, a small town in the Delta that consisted of 3 stores, a school, a post office, a cotton gin, and a couple hundred residents. Since 1882, when statistics on lynchings began to be collected, more than 500 African Americans have been killed by violence in Mississippi alone, although by 1950 it was far less common. So before Emmett departed for the Delta, his mother did caution him that Chicago and Mississippi were 2 very different worlds, and he should know how to behave in front of white people in the South. She also gave him his deceased father's ring with the initials LT on it. Although Emmett was only 15, he did look like an adult. He was stocky, muscular, and known to be a very confident young man. On August the 21st, 1955, Till arrived in Money, Mississippi. On August the 24th, 1955, so he'd been there for a couple of days, Till skipped church that day to hang out with his cousins and went to Bryant's grocery store to buy some candy. His cousins were sharecroppers who had been picking corn all morning. In contrast, Emmett showed his cousins a picture of his integrated class back in Chicago, even claiming that he had a white girlfriend. One of the local boys dared Till to speak to Carolyn Bryant. Carolyn was on her own in the shop as her husband Roy was out of town on a shrimping trip. Now query on what happened in the shop that day, and Bryant claimed that Emmett grabbed her while she was stocking candy and said, "How about a date, baby?" There was also claims that he whistled at her. Conversely, his cousin, who was in the shop, said that he witnessed no inappropriate behaviour at all. He simply bought candy. Either way, Bryant ran outside and got a pistol from her car, and seeing this happen, the boys then fled and ran away. So a couple of days after that, on August the 27th, 1955, Roy Bryant then returned home from his shrimping trip. After wrongfully kidnapping the wrong boy, Bryant learned that what he said as Negro in the shop was from Chicago and staying with Mose Wright. Several witnesses overheard Bryant and his half-brother, J.W. Milam, discuss kidnapping Till. That night between 2 and 3:30 a.m., Bryant, Milam, and Carolyn went to Mose Wright's house demanding Till. Wright told Bryant he was from the North and knew no better. Bryant told him he wouldn't live till his next birthday if he didn't produce Till. They tied him up and put him in the back of their truck, drove to a barn in the Drew. They apparently beat him until he was conscious on the way there. So August the 28th, 1955. Reports do differ, but evidence suggests he was brutally beaten, shot in the head, tied with barbed wire, and had a 35-kilogram fan attached to his body. Bryant and Milam then drove desperately looking for a place to throw the body as the sun began to rise on the morning of the 28th of August. They settled for a spot near the Tallahatchie River, which is where Emmett's unrecognisable body would then be found. So, finding the body. Mose Wright stayed on his front porch for 20 minutes waiting for Till to return. When he didn't return, he went out looking for him, but he did not ring the police, still fearing for his life. Curtis Jones called the police and Emmett's mum. Bryant and Milam were called in for questioning. They admitted they'd taken Emmett, but claimed they'd released him the same night. Word got out that Till was missing, and soon Medgar Evers, the NAACP representative for Mississippi, became involved. He actually disguised himself as a cotton picker and went into the fields in search of information about Emmett Till. 3 days after his abduction, Till's swollen and disfigured body was found by two boys fishing in the Tallahatchie River. His head was very badly damaged. He had been shot above the right ear, an eye was dislodged from the socket, there was evidence that he had been beaten on the back and the hips, and his body weighted by the fan blade, which was fastened around his neck with barbed wire. He was nude but wearing a silver ring with the initials LT and May 25th, 1943 carved in it. Confusion about Till's whereabouts and lack of a positive identification of the body retrieved from the river compounded issues in the case that eventually did influence the trial. The Delta Democrat Times, which was a local Mississippi newspaper, reported that Till may have been hidden by his relatives or perhaps returned to Chicago for his safety. The body's face was unrecognisable due to the trauma and having been submerged in water. Mose Wright was called to the river and identified Till. The silver ring that Till wore was removed and returned to Wright. The next passed to the district attorney as evidence. Stories from witnesses, both black and white, conflict about whether the ring was on Till's body and who knew that he had actually worn it previously. So there's a comparison of what Till looked like beforehand on the left, what the body that was pulled from the river that was Till's looks like on the right. So you can see just how badly he was treated and how badly he was beaten. So the reaction to this and the funeral. Although lynching and racially motivated murders had occurred throughout the South for decades, the circumstances surrounding Emmett Till's murder and the timing acted as a catalyst to attract national attention to the case of a 14-year-old boy who had allegedly been killed for flirting with a white woman. Till's murder aroused feelings about segregation, law enforcement, relations between the North and South, activities of the NAACP and the White Citizens Councils, all of which were played out in a drama staged in newspapers all over the US and abroad. Mamie Till demanded the return of her son to Chicago, apparently having to intervene to stop a quick burial in Mississippi. She insisted on seeing the body so that she could be sure that it was him. She remarked at the time about the unbelievable stench that was coming from her son's body that she claimed that she could smell 2 blocks away. She decided to have an open casket funeral, saying there was just no way I could describe what was in that box. No way, and I just wanted the world to see. Tens of thousands of people lined the street outside the mortuary to view Till's body, and days later, thousands more attended his funeral. This led to huge publicity, which in turn led to widespread shock and outrage among black and white people who could not believe the images of Emmett's disfigured corpse. The NAACP Executive Secretary, Roy Wilkins, characterized the incident as a lynching and said that Mississippi was trying to maintain white supremacy through murder. Following Roy Wilkins' comments, white opinion began to shift. White people were urged to reject the influence of Northern opinion and agitation. Tallahatchie County earned the nickname the Free State of Tallahatchie, according to a former sheriff, because people here do what they damn well please, making the county often very difficult to govern. Racism seemed as strong as ever in certain parts of the South. Controversy loomed with varying eyewitnesses claiming different stories about the discovery of Till's body. Some locals went as far as to accuse the NAACP of planting the dead body and placing Till's ring on it. Despite this, there were overwhelming evidence to suggest Bryant's guilt. Further evidence of local support for Bryant and Milam can be seen that over the fact that $10,000 were raised in Delta to help pay for their defence. The impending trial would be reported across the whole of the country. And here's a picture of Emmett's funeral and his mother looking out over his open casket. So that's what the public saw. So the trial itself. The trial was held in Sumner, near to where Till's body was found. In September 1955, and it lasted for 5 days. Reporters came from all over the country. No black people were allowed to stay in local hotels, and the courtroom was segregated. The jury was all white and all male, and they were allowed to drink on duty. A young black man was even placed in prison the night before the trial started because he had information that would have supported Mamie Till's case. The whole hearings were seen to be very informal, so very unlike a trial would be done today. On the 23rd of September, the jury acquitted, which means let off, both defendants after just 67 minutes of deliberation. One juror said, "If we hadn't stopped to drink pop, it wouldn't have taken us that long." In later interviews, jurors acknowledged that they knew that Bryant and Milam were guilty, but simply did not believe that life imprisonment or the death penalty were fit punishments for white people who had killed a black man. Newspapers in major international cities were reporting outrage at the verdicts and strong criticism of American society. Meanwhile, other newspapers reported that the court system had done its job. Till's story continued to make the news for weeks following the trial, raising the issue of black people living in a Jim Crow society. Sensationally, in 1956, Bryant and Milam struck a deal with Look magazine. They were protected against double jeopardy, which means that you can't be tried for the same crime twice. They allegedly received $4,000 and gave a tell-all interview to the magazine. Milam admitted to shooting Till, and both claimed they felt they'd done nothing wrong. This caused prominent civil rights leaders to push the federal government to investigate the case. Till's murder contributed to the passing of the Civil Rights Act of 1957 and indirectly to the bus boycott in 1955 and 1956, for it was Till that Rosa Parks claimed was on her mind the day she refused to give up her seat. As a result, some historians say it started the rapid growth of the civil rights movement. Civil rights campaigners used publicity to make it hard for people to ignore outrages and injustice. The NAACP produced a pamphlet called M is for Mississippi and Murder, linking the cases of Till and other two black men, Lee and Smith, all murdered in Mississippi in 1955. So that is Bryant and Milam after they've been let off at their trial. Okay, thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to the Preachable History Hub. The next video is going to be on the Queensborough sit-ins.